Welcome back, everyone, to the VIBE Edu Podcast. I have the pleasure and honor to be with Kim Gameroz, TJ Vari, Mitch Weathers, and myself, Joshua Stamper, as we are kicking off the third episode of a series we're calling The System. Of course, we're talking about the educational system. Today, though, I think we're going in a completely different direction. TJ, you kind of set it up last episode for us, but more in terms of the new teacher preparation and how they may have an impact on change. Probably because, like I think you said, in the future, they're going to eventually turn into leaders on the campus, leaders in the district, and of course have influence in a lot of different ways. So TJ, can I throw it your way to kind of kick us off?
Yeah, I think a lot of what we learn about education happens during our education. And then I think a lot of that is reinforced in our teacher prep programs. And Mitch was saying it pre-show, it ends up being too heavy on like other people's philosophy and our own philosophy versus what works and strategy and hopefully ways in which we can change current practices as new teachers. And I believe deeply in like spending a lot of time with new teachers. They're one of the most vulnerable populations in the school. I always say the two most vulnerable are new teachers and best teachers. The new teachers typically leave the profession at a alarming rate within 5 years of starting. So there's just a lot of things we can do to improve the education system if we invest in changing teacher prep programs. And just the example with the philosophy piece is like, go look up a bunch of educational philosophies and see where you're aligned to that. I really honestly, if right now, and I teach in school leadership programs, I don't know if that's useful for helping people to see how they can make a change. So there's a lot to be said about new teachers and a lot to unpack here, but teacher prep programs, for sure, we can make some adjustments to them. And I think that is happening throughout the country. So I hope we get some higher education leaders listening to the show and maybe giving us a call.
Kim, you were just helping a new teacher.
I know. So last night with this school district that we were with, at the very, very end, this new middle school teacher, cutie patootie, 6th grade, she goes, I just loved all of this. I was like, well, I love that you were here. And she's like, it's action steps. I know I can do it tomorrow. This is amazing. She's like, but I don't think I was supposed to be here. And I was like, why? She's like, because I'm not from this school district. I'm from a different district. And I was like, how'd you get to join? So what happened was through induction, right? You have to go through induction to clear your credential. Through this program, my link was like leaked. It was leaked and it was given out. I know. I mean, it was like so serendipitous is kind of what it was, right? Because here the leaders of this one school district are like, oh shoot, like how'd this happen? And I'm looking at it as like, no, bring them on. Let's go. So, I mean, before we even recorded today, I emailed her because she had reached out to me. She emailed me just thanking me again. And I was like, listen, I'm CCing your principal because we can make this happen. Like, absolutely, we can make this happen. Because when teachers, especially your new teachers, are listening to somebody, whether it's virtual or in person, actually give them solutions and actually give them like action steps, doable things they can do the following day. Like, it is so different from the theory, right? Like, I think, again, TJ, what you were saying, when our teachers are in these programs, it is so filled. I mean, you say theory, I might say fluff. I would say it's filled with fluff and they need action. They need to know what to do. And when you finally talk to somebody who's able to give you your next steps, it's like, wow, that felt good. Let me do it again. And then there's consistency and then there's change. And that's what we've been talking about, right? With these episodes is how do you create the change? Well, make it actionable, make it doable, make it simple. It has to actually work. I know, Mitch, we talk about this all the time. Like, the stuff actually works. So go do it, go try it. And then guess what? Keep on doing that because it's going to feel good.
Right.
So what does that system look like for our new teachers? I mean, if we're saying new teachers can impact change, are we doing that as soon as they put feet inside the building as far as like our new teacher programs that we've constructed? I mean, typically staff comes in like what, a week before everyone else if they're new to a building. I mean, are we looking at those types of programs as far as allowing them to understand what change looks like?
Well, I think all of it's on the table for sure. But I also think, so you said do what works. And so I would say in the prep program, one thing that's missing in the US because it's local education agency decision making around curriculum is we typically don't like train all the fifth grade teachers in every program across the country how to implement a specific reading program, because we know they're going to just go into a school and they're going to implement whatever reading program the school has.
Right.
So without going into all of, thoughts on that part of things, one thing is a prep program that picks a curriculum and says, this is how you implement a curriculum like this. You see what this says here? That means this. This is how you do that. We're going to practice this in front of one another, because I think it's not safe to assume that somebody's going to get to a fifth grade school and get a fifth grade reading curriculum and be able to read the curriculum and implement it right away. And it's not safe to assume that there's somebody who's going to help them do that. And so we talked about fidelity on the last episode. I really want new teachers, the change they can make right away is to do something really well as fast as possible when you get there. Mm-hmm. To not have this lagging, like they always say, like, you're not going to be good until years 3 to 5 or year 7. I'm like, that can't be. No. We got kids in front of these people for those 7 years that you're talking about. So how do we train new teachers to do things as best as possible right away? I'm not telling them to buck the system on their first day, but change happens in other ways.
Yeah, we used to tell our new teachers and new leaders too, actually probably more so new leaders, is like, don't knock down the fence until you know why it was built. And sometimes we can't assume like they understand when is the appropriate opportunity to challenge a system or a practice, and maybe even having that type of conversation of like, you may need to live in it a little bit to understand why it exists. And if it's something that is productive and something that is effective, versus just like you said, TJ, coming in day one and questioning or not doing something because you feel like it's not worthwhile. So I think there is kind of a process with even just the understanding and the challenging process of that to try to not only help the campus, but then also help themselves as a new teacher.
Yeah, I used to do this speech in front of pre-service science teachers, and one of the questions that always come up is like, how do I be good at this? How do I demonstrate my effectiveness? And one of my answers was, when everybody else says that they're not on board with the new initiative, especially new people, I think it's important to do that new initiative as best as they can, right? Like you said, Josh, like we don't want to knock down the fence before we know why it was built, but also the new stuff that's coming down, that's what I would also want to be really good at the core product and really good at the new stuff that's coming down. You demonstrate that, but my point about the prep programs, because we're not always just talking to new teachers on the show, the point about the prep programs is to teach people how to approach that.
So I was working with teachers just recently. They got a new reading program, right? New writing program, new math program. We're piloting all of these things this school year. And there's a huge sense of overwhelm for your elementary school teachers that have to teach it all, right? Mm-hmm. And for me, I always tell them it's okay, because best practices of all of those different things. Like we've walked you through what that includes, like what your best practices in reading, what that block of time really looks like, what your math block of time really needs to include and should look like. And I think that what they need to know, like TJ, what you were saying, like, doesn't matter what program, right, or whatever new rollout it is, your block of time is still going to be the same, but different. You're just using this new curriculum, but it still gets to be you. Here's how you look at it. And then you get to plug in all of those goody parts that make you feel good and they're good for kids. And that's really, really hard for teachers to do. They get stuck in the spiral of it's a new program, it's a new way of teaching, it's new, right? Instead of no. Look, you still can have all these best pieces. Now we get to pull from this new curriculum to plop it all in. That's really, really hard for teachers to do. I mean, I was just in New Jersey, and that's what I was doing one-on-one with a teacher in her home at her kitchen table for hours. And all we got through was just the reading, right? Just the reading. And by the way, that's like an hour of your day. Well, you've got 7 hours with kids. So, 1 hour is set and done. But if you can teach teachers how to do that, I feel like they're going to be better teachers because of it.
Yeah.
Mitch is still thinking.
Mm-hmm. I always give Mitch a little bit of wait time.
Me too.
It's part of my
cognitively slower than part of your routine.
It's part of my routine.
Everyone choose a little different, Mitch. So
yeah,
just digest. Yeah.
Takes me a little while.
You need some food, buddy.
I think another way I do. My sandwich is ready at 12:30, so I'm watching the clock.
I knew it was coming.
I placed an order right before we hit record. And I guess when I was hearing you, Kim, one of the ways, kind of what I call the 3 keys, it's clarity, modeling, and routine. And I've worked with enough teachers over the years, and new teachers in particular. What I've seen is even if you're still like honing your chops and making this thing your own, pedagogically speaking and philosophically speaking and all of that, if you can clearly model and establish a predictable learning environment and then use that as a framework, if you will, or a scaffold for whatever it is you're teaching, which is kind of what I hear you saying. And it's so true in a self-contained, you're just a jack of all trades, right? You're doing what, it's not what a middle school teacher does, but the kid goes to 7 different classes. Well, you're doing it all day, right? Which is amazing. But if you can figure out and implement strategies that are research backed or based or driven, and they do work, then you can use that and rely on it. You may tweak it depending on what you're teaching a little bit, but if you can just have that in place. I've just seen it for teachers. They're still figuring it out, but it's like, and back to your point too, Kim, about practical, right? Working with new teachers. It's like, there's nothing wrong with theory, but this is what it looks like tomorrow. You have to be able to say, go do this.
Yes.
And if you're not, then what we tend to do in education, regardless of your teacher prep program, has been my experience, is you do what was done to you.
Yeah.
Right. And sure. I did that. I did my credential. I got my master's degree, and I got in the classroom, and the stuff you have to do, like, how do you start? Nobody talked about it. Mm-hmm. How do you transition? Where do you put your stuff? Okay. I had a binder, and I remember clearly thinking, well, we got to be organized. So you got to have a binder, because I had binders in school, and I mimicked what was done to me. And it wasn't until I started analyzing that and reflecting on it with folks with more experience that were more gifted teachers at the time. I was really like, this doesn't work. What was done to me doesn't work, and I need to iterate on that. So if we can equip if we're talking about teacher prep programs, I think that practical piece is so often missing. Mm-hmm. And when you come into a district, like you're saying, TJ, I completely agree with what you said. Like, we're not safe in assuming that it's happening in the credential program, right? And credential programs can't assume that it'll happen in the new teacher orientation. Right. So if we're both like, hey, let's do this and do it right, then new teachers, they have to have success. Nobody in their right mind, well, let me say it this way. if you've been unsuccessful for 7 years in the classroom and you've had support, you might want to get a different job. I'm just saying, like, I'm not sure. Is that okay for me to say on this? Like,
Yes.
it's like you said,
You already said it,
are
buddy.
kids to have there's kids in the room, and either we need to get you some different support. But my thing is, like, if I was unsuccessful for that long, I probably would have quit anyhow. And if that's happening because of a lack of support and a lack of practicality and the things that teachers need to be successful, then shame on leadership and everyone who prepped them and is supporting them, you know?
Mm-hmm. I want to piggyback off that, Mitch, because you talked about like the research and the theory. And I think that's really important to understanding the system of change, because one, teachers do have a lot of clout and can do a lot on a campus. So I want to just say that as like my baseline first. Two, I think when you're trying to advertise change or trying to persuade change as far as you as a teacher going to a leader, I think you do need to have the research behind you. I think you need to have data. I think you need to have some stories, and you also need to have student outcomes. And I'll just give a quick example of this. Like, as a teacher, after my third year, I saw an issue with like homework. And I know we've kind of joked as like, we need to talk about this at some point on the show because I think all of us have like a visceral reaction to just the world of homework. But this was a little while ago. But homework was a reason why a lot of our students were failing. And so for myself, I was like, well, we have a ton of dead time before school even starts. And we have kids in the building and they're literally just sitting in the cafeteria or they're just sitting in a hallway waiting for a bell to ring for them to go to class. So what if we utilize this time? And so that's what I did. I came to the admin and I just brought it all out as far as the data, the student grades, the wasted time, all this kind of stuff, and said, hey, what if we just did like a peer tutoring and like literally invite like the lower 25% of the student grades. And I took it on myself as a teacher. Wow. And guess what happened? All of the grades went up for all of those who participated. Then I also got a grant and I got food for the students. And then all of a sudden I had teachers just showing up to help tutor. I didn't ask them. They just heard about the program and wanted to help out kids. So just allowing an opportunity for teachers to, one, understand like you can make huge waves on your campus, but two, if you are looking to go to leadership and understanding the system of persuasion, you're going to need to have the theory, you're going to need to have data, you're going to need to have the stories, you're going to have to have the student outcomes to provide that to really prove that something needs to occur, and then present your opportunity or your difference or your system that you want to change.
So what I'm saying though is that what you just described, that needs to be taught to people before they get into the system, or the system will never change because they will revert back to what was always done, or they'll think I don't have the power to do that. That what you just described needs to be taught to people. And to Mitch's point earlier, research-based, evidence-based practices, what are those and how can I access them? And how do I read the research? That all of that needs to be taught. And I'm sure there's programs out there doing it. Like, I'd love to know, but I also am in front of a lot of teachers and say things like, who here knows how to analyze effect size? Who here has read Visible Learning by John Hattie? Who here has looked at the research on the way we remember things? Who here has read Powerful Teaching by Pooja Agarwal and Patrice Bain? Who here has read Executive Functions for Every Classroom by Mitch Weathers? Who here has looked at that stuff? And a lot of people are like, I never heard of it. And so,
except for my book.
They knew that.
Everyone knows Mitch's book.
No, but I mean, what I'm saying is, I don't even know if we need to introduce all the books. We need to introduce the how to access that and how to interact with your profession and how to continue to grow. It's part of, there he goes. It's part of your personal growth. And it's back to our first 4 episodes on professional development, which is you're in charge of your continuous learning. Right. And that's also part of what needs to be taught. Maybe there needs to just be a mindset course or a series, but yeah, it's an approach that I want people to have when they show up.
And it's interesting. It's tragic that much of what you just said, TJ, at least from my experiences in teacher prep programs, it's not there. And it's a tragedy because, having a course on how we learn, like the cognitive science behind it, rooted in the science of learning research, is really interesting. And I talk about it a lot. And, when I'm speaking on executive functions, and people are always just like, you can just tell, like, oh, that's really interesting how, like, we know how we learn now. It's not up for debate. And yet many of the classrooms in the country are not implementing strategies that are aligned with those practices, not because the teacher thinks it's BS. It's just like you said, they never heard of it. Like, wow. And it's really interesting when you do start to learn about it. It's like, wow, I could do that. And it's like, yeah, you can. So,
and it's not hard.
No.
Yeah, but I think that mindset too is lacking in even new leaders. Like TJ, I know you do this too, but like there's opportunities for us to speak to college programs where they're literally aspiring leaders that are in these courses, these cohorts, and you bring up these like pushing back on the system and giving them autonomy to do different things, and they just look shocked. Like this is like brand new information that they've never heard, that they have power and permission to do all these creative and innovative ideas to help not only the teachers but their students. And for me, that's always heartbreaking to say, like, you've been in education for a while. You obviously have been able to do all of these things, not because you're just a teacher, but because you do have influence on the campus, but you've never even felt like you've had that role or that opportunity to do so. Now you're getting a title and you're amazed at the fact that you can do these things. And that mindset, we just, again, assuming, we just assume educators like possess this skill, and it is lacking. And I don't know, I'll just go back to, it's heartbreaking to every time I go into a leadership cohort and I speak to these folks, there's more questions on that topic alone than anything else, because it's just so foreign to them.
I think like what we were saying, everybody just keeps on doing like what was done to them or what everybody else is doing, right? They just like kind of spiral and just keep on doing it. And so that's why change never happens. I'm even thinking about teachers who are, leaving their classroom setting and going into more of like a district created role. And I think there's so much excitement when you are getting pulled into this role because it's never really been done before. Maybe it's like a new created sort of a something. And then what ends up happening though is change doesn't happen and support doesn't happen, because then they just spiral into what everybody else is doing, And so I think, I don't know, those are really good conversations to have. I think not just listening to us, but like after people that are listening right now, I really want you guys to get with your herd, get with your people and have those conversations. Like, what does that look like and sound like for all of you? Just to pull everyone forward. I think that's like my favorite new phrase is like, how can we pull ourselves forward?
Well, and for the new teacher specifically, if it's not happening in the prep program, maybe orientation, onboarding, or in a support, setup with a mentor or something. But the job, and if we're talking about system change, we all know, like at all levels, everyone is overworked. There's too much. It's like, it's for a new teacher, so often it's just the tyranny of the urgent. I'm just taking care of things, trying to survive, so I can't really get metacognitive about my strategies and the why isn't this whole thing working, and stepping back. Like that's got to happen in a time and space when there's some, the teacher load is reduced, right?
It's kind of like that book. I know we mentioned books last episode too, but Upstream, where they talk about like the problem blindness. And instead of going upstream and challenging, the current that's coming your way.
Well, what's upstream, I think, I will say for the school leaders, for sure, when we wrote Retention for a Change, which the philosophy of that book is, if we change the system, we will retain people. So it's Retention for a Change. we dedicated 2 chapters from the whole book, 2 chapters to just new teacher support because they're so vulnerable. And so I would say if you're a school leader and you're not seeing the prep program really preparing teachers to be excellent on day one, we've got to have a really like wraparound services for our new teachers, not just to retain them, but to support them and to help them grow. And I am a firm believer that those are the people who become leaders, and they become leaders faster the better that we do that for them. And we need our new people. We need more new people, and we need our new people to become excellent, like I said, fast, but we also need them to be leaders quickly as well.
And leadership, not just in terms of school leadership, right? Teacher leaders
100%.
Stepping into a leadership role.
Yep.
Leadership at every level. Like there's a couple of, we talk about the misnomer of you're not good until year 5 or whatever it is. And that's a myth. But the other thing that's a myth, and I do believe that we don't want to overwhelm people, but another thing that's a myth is that you need to wait to go back to school. Now, I would go back to school as fast as I possibly can to get my master's degree. It's actually the more lucrative, the faster you get it, the more lucrative it is over time. Mm-hmm. So there's a technical tip. But yeah, I mean, I think just investing in these people the best we can, because they could become like the yearbook person or something. All of that is leadership and change, and that's how you change the system. Not people waiting to go back to school or to become a leader or to somebody retires.
And teachers who are prepared and set up for success year one. So I agree, of course, right? There's things you learn on the job that you're going to get better year after year, but you can absolutely have a successful year one. And the people who do tend to be have the capacity to support other new teachers who are coming on board after them in subsequent years. And I think if you start to look at that as a change vehicle, there's impact there, right? But if I'm, again, just kind of like in fight or flight mode, I don't have any capacity to help on board new teachers, right?
It's true. Well, that's why I was going to say the second thing that I would make sure if I was running in the system, and I did this when I was assistant soup, is to make sure that all my assistant principals and principals had coaching of some sort, group coaching, individual coaching, but I'm going to dump into the capacity of these people so they can do important work, not urgent work. And I know we're coming up on time, but I do want to say one more thing, because I'm kind of on fire after the 28th minute, but I feel like the other thing we can't tell new teachers, and new teachers should walk away from people who say that it gets better. Like an overwhelmed new teacher should never hear it gets better. It doesn't get better. It doesn't get easier. You get better at it.
Yeah.
And the faster you get better at it, the easier it will feel. But it's never going to not be hard. Teaching is always.
It's not easy. Yeah.
Don't tell new teachers it gets better, and don't listen to people who tell you it gets better. You get better.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Good.
Well, and if you get better, hopefully the system gets better if you are using your influence and power for that. Mm-hmm. With that, I think I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to drop the mic. I'm going to close it down. But I think, TJ, you made a great observation here too, as far as support that educators and leaders need, which is that coaching piece. And so if you're looking to do that individually or in a group, everyone on the screen provides that. So make sure that you're tapping into each one of us. Obviously, we have our own specialities and things that we do, but we will have all of our websites on the show notes in YouTube. So make sure that you're checking out everything that is happening. Everyone that's on the screen, the three of you are brilliant. I love having these conversations. I'm so honored and privileged to speak with you each week. But I want everyone that's listening, everyone that's tuning in on YouTube, to make sure that you're tapping into their brilliance also, because there's a lot of services and things that we provide that can help you individually or at a campus level or at a district level. So I want to mention that. And the other thing too is, we keep talking about change the last few episodes. Well, we've changed the format of our video. So if you like this new format, throw in the comment that you love it, and maybe we'll continue this because we're on a new platform right now. So with that, subscribe, share this out. We love the growth that is occurring with this community. And of course, we want to be here to support you in any way possible. Make sure you're reaching out. Make sure that you are, clicking on the polls, clicking on social media, doing everything as far as the engagement piece. And of course, that helps this show out even further. So yeah, I appreciate all of you, and we'll see you next week.